Nearly 2 years had passed since their graduation, and Cecil and Bertia's wedding was finally approaching. Wanting to properly greet his future in-laws, Cecil paid a visit to the Noches household, only to be met by an unexpected roadblock. The moment he arrived, Bertia's younger brother Aneth declared that his sister would never leave home and that he intended to marry her himself. Ever since learning that his beloved sister was being taken away, Aneth had treated Cecil as his greatest enemy. While Bertia desperately tried to apologize for her brother's behavior, she looked suspiciously pleased by the attention. Unfortunately, things only became more chaotic when Aneth suddenly brought up heroes, villainesses, and capture targets, revealing that he had learned everything from Bertia talking in her sleep. Realizing just how much classified information she had apparently leaked while unconscious, Cecil could only stare in disbelief. The situation became even worse when Aneth accused Cecil of being the Demon King hiding behind a handsome prince's face. To Bertia's horror, Marquis Noches casually admitted that he may have been the one who started that rumor. Rather than deny it, Cecil cleverly pointed out that a Demon King and a Villainess actually sounded like a surprisingly suitable pair. Instead of helping, the idea immediately sent Bertia's imagination running wild, leaving Aneth even more confused than before. Seeing an opening, Cecil gently explained that marriage would not take Bertia away from him forever. She would always remain his sister, and he would simply be gaining an older brother. The final blow came when Cecil promised unlimited sweets whenever Aneth came to visit. Faced with cakes loaded with strawberries and chocolate, the young boy's resistance finally crumbled. After confirming that his sister would truly be happy, Aneth tearfully entrusted her future to Cecil. With the crisis resolved, Marquis Noches wrapped an arm around Cecil's shoulders and invited him for a drink. Officially, it was to thank the man who would soon become part of the family. Unofficially, however, it looked very much like a father preparing one final interrogation before handing over his precious daughter. A few days later, the wedding day finally arrived. As the capital erupted in celebration, Bertia cheerfully greeted the crowd, though her growing nervousness was becoming harder to hide with every passing minute. After the couple temporarily parted ways to prepare for the ceremony, Cecil found himself wondering whether his future wife would actually make it to the altar without causing a small disaster. Before long, Kuro appeared with an unexpected gift, a notebook titled Top 100 Things I Want to Do at My Wedding. Realizing it was Bertia's personal checklist, Cecil immediately began reviewing it. While some wishes had already been fulfilled, many remained unfinished. Naturally, he decided that every reasonable request would be granted before the day was over. Unfortunately, this noble decision came with one unavoidable victim: Zeno. As Cecil enthusiastically planned how to make Bertia's dream wedding a reality, Zeno quietly realized that his workload had just doubled. For Cecil, it was an act of love. For Zeno, it was blatant abuse of royal authority. As the ceremony began, beautiful music filled the grand hall. Listening to it, Cecil recalled that this had been one of Bertia's wishes. The wedding had originally been planned as a quiet and elegant affair, yet somehow the music made the moment feel even more special. Soon, the doors opened and Bertia entered alongside Marquis Noches. Watching her approach, Cecil was reminded of the day they first met. Back then, he had merely been curious about the strange girl standing before him. Yet before he realized it, she had become the person he treasured most. When the time came, Marquis Noches placed his daughter's hand in Cecil's and tearfully begged him to take good care of her. Cecil readily promised that he would, though the Marquis looked strangely intimidating despite being on the verge of tears. Meanwhile, Bertia was busy nervously chanting her own strange good luck ritual under her breath. Then, the moment Cecil invited her to walk beside him, she immediately stepped on her dress and nearly fell. Fortunately, he caught her before disaster could strike. Mortified, Bertia hurried to apologize, but Cecil simply smiled and reminded her that supporting his wife was part of a husband's duty. No matter what challenges awaited them, he promised to face them together. Hearing those words, Bertia could only stare at him with a face as red as her wedding bouquet. As the wedding ceremony commenced, the pastor began reciting the traditional blessings, offering thanks to the gods for guiding the couple to this moment. Cecil listened politely, though before long he found himself wondering whether the ceremony was meant to celebrate a marriage or test his endurance. While the blessings continued, his thoughts drifted toward far more interesting matters, namely the honeymoon and those mysterious onsen-ins Bertia had spoken about with suspicious enthusiasm. Fortunately, the ceremony eventually reached the exchange of rings. By custom, the bride and groom were expected to place their own rings on themselves, but Cecil had already decided that one particular tradition could be improved. Remembering an item from Bertia's top 100 wedding wishes, he gently took her hand, slid the ring onto her finger himself, and pressed a light kiss against it. The surprised look on her face alone made the decision worthwhile. Secretly, he found something rather satisfying about placing the symbol of their bond there with his own hands. When Bertia shyly returned the gesture and slipped his ring into place, Cecil felt an unexpected warmth settle in his chest. It was a simple act, yet somehow it carried more meaning than any grand ceremony. More than anything, he liked knowing that she had chosen this future for herself. As the exchange concluded, the pastor smiled and delivered the words everyone had been waiting for. The vows had been made, the rings exchanged, and now only one final step remained: the kiss. Gently lifting her veil, Cecil addressed her by her new name and made his vow. Through happiness and hardship, prosperity and struggle, he promised to stand beside her and cherish her for the rest of his life. Then he sealed those words with a kiss. While the moment was undeniably romantic, the overwhelming pressure radiating from Marquis Noches somewhere behind them suggested that at least one person in the hall was experiencing a very different emotion. When it became Bertia's turn, however, she completely lost her composure. After fumbling through several attempts, she abandoned the formal vows altogether and passionately declared that she would always love Cecil no matter what happened. The guests were touched by her sincerity, while Cecil quietly suspected she had forgotten most of the official wording. Still, it sounded exactly like something Bertia would do. Satisfied with her answer, he pointed out one small detail. She still hadn't sealed her vow with a kiss. Caught completely off guard, Bertia turned bright red, but after gathering her courage, she leaned forward and briefly kissed him. The gesture lasted only a moment, yet it left Cecil unexpectedly shaken. To his surprise, the calm and composed prince suddenly found himself flustered, while Bertia looked far too pleased with herself for someone who had forgotten half her wedding vows. Bertia immediately noticed the change in his expression and couldn't hold back her laughter. Unfortunately for Cecil, the more she laughed, the harder it became to maintain his usual composure. Deciding that his dignity had suffered enough for one day, he quickly urged the archbishop to continue the ceremony. The marriage certificate was then brought forward, and after the two signed their names, the archbishop formally declared their union recognized by the Kingdom of Alfasta. A wave of applause swept through the hall as the ceremony finally came to an end. Somehow, Cecil had managed to recover his composure, but the fact that Bertia had witnessed such a rare moment would likely haunt him for far longer than the ceremony itself. With the vows exchanged and the applause fading, Cecil quietly concluded that the ceremony had survived its share of chaos. Unfortunately, the wedding itself wasn't over yet. One final item remained on Bertia's famous wish list. Turning toward her, he simply told her to hold on tight. Before she could even process his words, he swept her into his arms and carried her off. The reaction was immediate. Bertia froze, the guests cheered, and somewhere in the crowd, several young men suddenly realized their future weddings had become much more complicated. To be fair, carrying her was no small feat. Beneath the elegant appearance of her dress lurked enough fabric, jewels, and decorations to qualify as military equipment. Even so, Cecil pressed forward without complaint. After all, Bertia had dreamed of being carried away like a princess after her wedding, and today was the day every one of her dreams deserved to come true. As if that wasn't embarrassing enough, Cecil casually kissed her cheek while carrying her, leaving Bertia completely overwhelmed. Meanwhile, her friends showered her with congratulations from every direction, praising the ceremony and her stunning appearance. Blushing furiously, Bertia thanked them all, while Cecil quietly reflected that fulfilling Bertia's wedding wishes was proving far more eventful than the wedding ceremony itself. Unfortunately, the young men gathered on one side of the hall seemed to have taken away a very different lesson. Rather than admiring the romance, they were busy discussing whether they could carry their future brides the same way. Some immediately declared it excellent training, while others complained that the crown prince had just raised the standard for weddings across the entire kingdom. Meanwhile, Bertia's brother looked as though a national tragedy had just occurred, prompting Cecil to quietly note that the man's happiness for the newlyweds seemed somewhat lacking. Even Sean appeared thoughtful, wondering whether such a gesture might make Joanna happy as well. Hearing that, the king simply remarked that it was something worth striving for. And just like that, what was meant to be a romantic wedding moment somehow turned into a source of motivation for half the kingdom's future husbands. Outside the hall, another of Bertia's wedding wishes was about to begin. As an attendant handed her a bouquet, the unmarried ladies gathered nearby immediately sharpened their focus. The bouquet toss was one of several unusual traditions Bertia had introduced, and it had attracted far more attention than anyone expected. The rumor that whoever caught the bouquet would be the next to marry had spread so widely that even foreign nobles had shown interest. What started as a simple activity had somehow grown into a full-scale competition. With great enthusiasm, Bertia tossed the bouquet into the air. Instantly, a fierce battle erupted as every participant lunged for it. However, before anyone could claim victory, Kuro leaped into action, snatched the bouquet out of midair, and proudly returned it to Bertia. The entire competition ended in a matter of seconds. While Bertia hurriedly explained that this was not a game of fetch, she also pointed out that tradition now declared Kuro the next future bride. At those words, Kuro immediately looked away. Unfortunately for her, her eyes briefly landed on Zeno first. Cecil noticed the exchange but wisely chose not to get involved. Soon afterward, Cecil escorted Bertia to the carriage. Then, just before departing, he casually turned toward Zeno and offered a piece of advice. Whatever happened in the future, he was not to cause any suspicious rumors involving young girls. Zeno immediately protested that spirits did not care about age, only making himself sound even more suspicious. Cecil decided not to pursue the argument further. Some problems, he concluded, were best left for another day. As the newlyweds made their way through the city, cheers followed them from every direction. Bertia happily remarked that the ceremony had gone perfectly, only for the next surprise to arrive moments later. Flower petals suddenly began raining from above, turning the streets into a sea of color. Looking up in amazement, Bertia could barely contain her excitement. It was another item from her wedding wish list, the flower shower. Thanks to Zeno's efforts and a little assistance from the flower spirits, the idea had become a reality. More importantly, it had produced exactly the reaction Cecil had hoped for. Seeing Bertia's face light up made all the preparation worthwhile. The celebrations continued long into the evening. The wedding cake was cut, the reception unfolded smoothly, and one by one, more of Bertia's wishes quietly came true. By the time the festivities finally ended, the two found themselves alone beneath the moonlight. Smiling brightly, Bertia remarked that Cecil always seemed to know exactly what she wanted. Hearing that, Cecil finally decided it was time to reveal his secret. Producing the notebook containing her famous wedding wish list, he watched as Bertia instantly froze in embarrassment. The mystery had been solved. Kuro had been supplying him with information all along. Yet despite her embarrassment, Bertia couldn't deny the results. Every surprise, every memorable moment, and every little detail she had loved throughout the day had come from those pages. When she thanked him from the bottom of her heart, Cecil simply pulled her into his arms. Beneath the moonlit sky, the two shared a quiet kiss, bringing their perfect wedding day to a fitting close. A few days later, the couple finally departed on their honeymoon. Naturally, Bertia had squeezed one last request onto her wedding wish list, turning their carriage into a proper bridal carriage. Watching her excitement, Cecil once again found himself amused by the unusual customs she brought from her world. As they traveled through the countryside, Bertia became captivated by a family of rabbits and, before she realized it, began talking about what their own future children might look like. The moment the words left her mouth, she turned bright red and desperately tried to take them back. Unfortunately, Cecil had already heard everything. Rather than teasing her, he quietly admitted that he would like a daughter who looked just like her. That single remark left Bertia completely speechless. Taking her hand, Cecil spoke of the happy family he hoped they would build together, and this time Bertia answered without the slightest hesitation. And so, the story came to a close, not with grand drama or fate-changing twists, but with two people looking toward the future together, happier than they had ever been before. 1 year later, Bertia had gradually settled into life at the royal palace. Unfortunately for Cecil, settling down did not mean becoming any less chaotic. Their wedding had become so influential that nobles and royalty from various countries regularly sought Bertia's advice for their own ceremonies. As if that weren't enough, her wedding magazine, Bertie, had become a surprising success among the public. Once again, she had managed to exceed every expectation. Cecil could only wonder how many more surprises awaited him in the future. Just then, Bertia came rushing toward him at full speed, loudly announcing that she had incredible news. Seeing how flustered she was, Cecil immediately hurried over. After taking a deep breath, Bertia finally revealed her secret, though the audience never got to hear what it was. Whatever she said, it was enough to leave Cecil smiling. After all, life with Bertia had never been boring, and he had a feeling it never would be.